The Eternal Sentinel had become the center of the galaxy's last hope. The ancient ship hung in space near Coalition Station, its massive hull bristling with weapon systems that made modern warships look like toys. Around it, a fleet of over 8,000 vessels from 30 different species prepared for a war unlike anything in recorded history. Captain So Young Kwan stood in the consciousness-linking chamber deep inside the Eternal Sentinel. The process that would connect her mind directly to the ship's quantum systems had killed 7 volunteers from other species. The neural pathways required to interface with humanity's ancient technology were too complex for non-human minds to handle. "Are you ready?" asked Admiral Park. His holographic form showed concern that had grown during the 3 failed attempts by human volunteers. The process was dangerous even for humans. 2 had died, and 1 had been left in a catatonic state. "I'm ready," So Young replied, though her hands shook as she approached the neural interface chair. The device looked like a throne made of crystalline metal, with hundreds of thin cables that would connect directly to her nervous system. Dr. Bo-Ram Lee monitored the medical equipment from the observation room. Consciousness link is initializing. Neural pathways are responding normally. She's surviving the initial connection. The process was unlike anything So Young had ever experienced. Her awareness expanded beyond her body, flowing through the ship's quantum networks. She could feel every system, every weapon, every sensor as if they were parts of her own body. The ship's massive engines felt like her heartbeat. The sensor arrays became her eyes, showing her space in ways that no human had ever seen before. But with the expansion of awareness came knowledge that threatened to break her mind. She saw the memories stored in the ship's computer core, 12,000 years of watching and waiting. She felt the pain of Admiral Park and the thousands of other consciousness uploads who had sacrificed their humanity to become eternal guardians. "I can see them," she whispered, her voice echoing strangely through the ship's communication system. "The Dark Ones. They're so much worse than the report suggested." Through the ship's long-range sensors, she could observe the enemy advance. The Dark Ones' ships moved through space like schools of predatory fish, their hulls seeming to absorb light itself. Where they passed, space became twisted and wrong as if reality was being eaten away from within. "How many?" asked Admiral Park. "The advance fleet numbers 47,000 ships," Yu Young replied. "But behind them, God help us, behind them is something that stretches across light years. The main force is so large it's like a moving galaxy of darkness." In the Coalition Command Center, High Counselor Jin A received the report with growing dread. The United Fleet they had assembled was impressive by any normal standard, but against what was coming it seemed pathetically small. "What's our status?" she asked Commander Yoon. 30 species have committed forces," he replied. 8,412 ships total. The Karn clan sent their entire war fleet. The Selenari Conclave has provided their most advanced vessels. Even some of the machine beings from the Nexus protocols have joined us. "And the others?" Yoon's expression darkened. "The Dreknari Empire is still mobilizing against us. They've declared humanity a threat to galactic security and are trying to convince other species to join them. 6 species have already pulled their forces back to defend their homeworlds." It was the nightmare scenario Admiral Park had predicted. Just when unity was most needed, the galaxy was tearing itself apart. Fear and pride were proving stronger than the need for survival. But in the shipyards that the Eternal Sentinel had constructed in just 3 weeks, something unprecedented was taking shape. Using technology that predated known civilization, the ancient ship had built hybrid vessels that combined humanity's quantum engineering with the best innovations from coalition species. The new ships were marvels of cooperative engineering. Karn warriors operated weapon systems guided by Selenari telepathic targeting. Human engineers worked alongside machine beings to create energy shields that could adapt to any attack. Even the peaceful aquatic collective had contributed, their bio-neural computers providing processing power that enhanced every system. Captain Dae Ho, Kim commanded one of the new hybrid vessels, the Unity's Blade. His crew was the most diverse in galactic history. Humans, Karn, Selenari, Nexus entities, and 6 other species working together as if they had trained for years instead of weeks. Captain, called his Karn weapons officer, "The first Dark One scout ship has entered sensor range. Distance, 2 light hours in closing." Through his ship's view screen, Dae Ho could see the enemy vessel. It was smaller than he had expected, but it moved through space in ways that hurt to watch. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence, leaving trails of shadow that lingered after it passed. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," came the transmission from the Eternal Sentinel. "The enemy scout will attempt to scan our fleet and transmit intelligence back to the main force. We cannot allow this. All vessels engage when in range." The battle that followed lasted only minutes, but it revealed both hope and terror. The hybrid ship's weapons were effective against the Dark One vessel. Their adaptive energy systems could actually damage the enemy's reality-bending hull. But the cost was enormous. The Dark One ship absorbed consciousness from the crews attacking it, leaving many sailors empty-minded even after their victory. "We can hurt them," reported Captain Kim. "But they can hurt us too. Every attack they make costs us minds, not just lives." In the aftermath of the brief battle, Dr. Minho Song analyzed the enemy vessel's remains. What he found was worse than anyone had imagined. "The ship is partially alive," he reported to the command staff. "It's made from matter that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But more than that, it's learned from our attack. The quantum echoes from its destruction are already being transmitted to the main force." Admiral Park's holographic form showed the strain of coordinating the massive fleet. "By the time the main force arrives, they'll know exactly how to counter our weapons. We'll have the advantage of surprise for exactly one battle." High Counselor Jin-A made the hardest decision of her life. "Then we use that one battle to end this war before it truly begins." "Admiral, can the Eternal Sentinel create a quantum corridor to their main fleet?" "It's possible," Park replied slowly, "but it would require channeling the ship's entire power output. And once we arrive, there would be no retreat. It would be victory or extinction." Around the chamber, representatives of 30 species looked at each other with the knowledge that they were about to gamble everything on a single desperate attack. Representative Kolthara of the Karn spoke first. "The Karn do not retreat from worthy enemies. If we must die, let it be in a battle that matters." Prime Elder Shalun's mental voice carried the wisdom of ages. "The Selenari have seen the rise and fall of civilizations for millions of years. This is the moment when a new age begins or consciousness dies forever. We choose the new age." One by one, every species in the Alliance agreed. They would take the entire fleet through the quantum corridor and strike at the heart of the Dark One force before it could spread throughout the galaxy. Captain So Young remained connected to the Eternal Sentinel's consciousness network, feeling the preparations for the massive undertaking. The ship was gathering energy from quantum foam itself, building power levels that would either save the galaxy or tear it apart. "All ships, prepare for quantum transit," Admiral Park announced. "In 30 minutes, we will either end this threat forever or die in the attempt. Either way, the galaxy will remember that when darkness came, consciousness chose to fight." As the countdown began, messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Even some of the species that had refused to join the battle sent words of support. Prayers in 100 languages, hopes in 1,000 forms. The combined will of every thinking being in the galaxy focused on the fleet that would either save them all or die trying. The Eternal Sentinel's engines reached critical power. Space around the ancient ship began to bend and twist as it prepared to open a doorway across the galaxy. 10 seconds to quantum transit," announced Admiral Park. "All ships, prepare for the last battle of consciousness against the dark." The stars disappeared as the Allied fleet vanished into the quantum corridor, racing toward a confrontation that would determine whether thought itself would survive in the galaxy. Behind them, the galaxy held its breath and waited to learn whether hope or hunger would inherit the stars. Admiral Park's holographic form appeared in the Coalition's emergency command center, his ancient eyes heavy with the weight of 12,000 years of knowledge. Around the table sat the representatives of the species that had chosen to stand together: Selenari elders, Karn warriors, human officials, and a handful of others who believed the threat was real. "Show them," said High Counselor Jin-A. "Show them what we're really facing." The room darkened as Admiral Park activated his historical records. The first images showed star charts from humanity's ancient empire. Thousands of systems connected by trade routes that spanned the galaxy. Worlds that hosted billions of humans living in cities that floated in space or stretched across entire continents. "This was our territory at its peak," Park explained. "Over 14,000 inhabited systems, a population of nearly 2 trillion humans. We had technology that could reshape matter at the atomic level, Ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. Weapons that could crack planets. Dr. Minho Song leaned forward, studying the data. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible. How did you power such a civilization? We learned to harvest energy directly from quantum foam, Park replied. We built machines that could convert thought into matter. We even learned to upload consciousness and achieve a form of digital immortality. Commander Hyun Woo Yoon watched the displays with growing amazement. With technology like that, how did you lose to anyone? Park's expression grew darker. Because our enemies weren't from our universe, watch. The images changed, showing the first contact with the Dark Ones. The enemy ships looked wrong somehow. They seemed to bend light around them and cast shadows that moved independently. When they attacked, reality itself seemed to break down around them. They appeared without warning in the end of our system. Park continued. Our first response was a standard diplomatic contact protocol. We sent a peaceful exploration vessel to establish communication. The hologram showed what happened next. The human ship approached the dark vessel, broadcasting messages of greeting in hundreds of languages. The response was immediate and horrifying. The exploration ship simply stopped. Its lights went out, its engines died, and its crew became silent. But the ship itself remained intact, floating empty in space. We sent rescue teams, Park said. What they found defied understanding. The crew was still alive, but they were empty. Their minds were gone, not dead, but completely drained. They stared at nothing and responded to nothing. It was as if their consciousness had been eaten. Representative Kolthara of the Karn clan studied the data with a warrior's eye.
What happened when you tried to fight them?
We tried everything, Park replied grimly. Nuclear weapons, antimatter bombs, quantum disruptors, nothing worked. The Dark Ones didn't just absorb our attacks, they learned from them. Every weapon we used against them became less effective with each battle. The hologram showed massive space battles between human fleets and the dark entities. Human ships numbered in the thousands, their weapons lighting up space like artificial stars. But with each exchange, their effectiveness decreased. The Dark Ones adapted to every tactic, every weapon, every strategy. They don't think like us, Park explained. They don't have individual minds that can be confused or tricked. They are a collective consciousness that spans dimensions. When we destroyed one of their ships, the knowledge of how we did it instantly became available to all of them. Dr. Song was taking notes frantically. How many of them were there? We never knew for certain. Their ships would appear from what looked like empty space, cracks in reality itself. For every one we destroyed, 2 more would appear. We estimated that their total force was in the millions of vessels. Prime Elder Shallan of the Selenari spoke with the weight of ancient wisdom. How did humanity survive for 300 years against such odds? Park's holographic face showed pain that had lasted millennia. By becoming monsters ourselves, we learned that the only way to fight them was to make choices no civilized species should ever make. We sacrificed entire worlds to deny them populations to feed on. We developed weapons that could destroy consciousness itself, weapons that were as dangerous to us as to them. The images showed the darkest chapters of humanity's war, planets where billions of humans chose suicide rather than be consumed. Human commanders ordering the destruction of their own colonies, cities full of children being evacuated to ships that would be destroyed rather than captured. We created the void bombs, Park said quietly, weapons that could erase minds from existence, not just kill the body but destroy the soul itself. We used them on our own people when evacuation was impossible. The representatives around the table sat in horrified silence. The scale of sacrifice was beyond anything they could imagine. But you won, said Counselor Seojin Choi. You drove them back. At a cost that nearly destroyed us, Park replied. The final battle required us to collapse an entire star cluster, 27 systems, including some of our oldest colonies. The gravitational wave created a barrier that the Dark Ones couldn't cross. But it also killed 3 billion humans and left us with barely 1/10 of our original fleet. The hologram showed the aftermath. Vast stretches of space turned into cosmic graveyards. Human ships drifting empty through the void. Worlds that had been evacuated so quickly that meals were still sitting on tables in abandoned cities. The survivors faced a choice, Park continued. Try to rebuild the empire and risk attracting the Dark Ones again, or disappear completely. Most chose to disappear. They destroyed their advanced technology, fled to primitive worlds, and started over as simple farmers and hunters. But some stayed behind, Janae said. Yes, volunteers uploaded their consciousness into guardianships like the Eternal Sentinel. We became watchmen, scanning deep space for signs of the Dark One's return. For 12,000 years, we watched and waited. Commander Yoon studied the current sensor data from the Outer Rim, and now they're back. With a force far larger than before, Park confirmed. My scans show at least 50,000 ships in the Advance Force alone. The main fleet appears to number in the hundreds of thousands. They've spent 12 millennia in dark space, growing stronger and learning new ways to feed on consciousness. Dr. Song looked at the biological data with growing alarm. According to this, they've evolved. The original Dark Ones could only drain consciousness through direct contact. These new ones can feed from a distance. Yes, Park said grimly. They've learned to consume the quantum field that connects all conscious minds. When they arrive in a system, every thinking being in that system begins to die, regardless of distance or protection. The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat became clear. This wasn't just an invasion. It was an extinction event for all intelligent life in the galaxy. What can we do? Asked Representative Colthera. If your ancient empire with all its power barely defeated them, how can we hope to succeed? Admiral Park's expression showed the first hint of something that might have been hope. Because this time, you're not alone. 12,000 years ago, humanity stood against the dark by ourselves. Today you have allies. The Selenari's mental abilities, the Karn's warrior spirit, the Coalition's diversity of thought and approach. These are weapons we never had before. But will it be enough? Janae asked. Park was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. But I know this. If we fail, consciousness itself dies in this galaxy. Every thought, every dream, every spark of intelligence will be consumed. That's not a fate any of us can accept. As if summoned by his words, new alarms began sounding. Commander Yoon's aide rushed in with urgent reports. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from the Outer Rim. 7 more systems have gone dark in the past 4 hours. But this time we're detecting energy signatures, massive ones moving toward inhabited space. Admiral Park's ancient face hardened with determination. The Vanguard has arrived. The real war begins now. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council was unlike anything in its 50-year history. Representatives from 47 different species filled the great chamber on Coalition Station, all talking at once. The air was thick with tension and the smell of fear from dozens of different alien biologies. High Counselor Ginny O stood at the human delegation's podium, facing a room full of angry, frightened, and confused aliens. She had been humanity's voice in the Coalition for 10 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The report from Captain Kim had reached Coalition Command 12 hours ago. Since then, the entire galaxy had been in chaos. Order. I demand order, shouted Chancellor Vorthak of the Draknari Empire. His reptilian features were twisted with rage as he pointed one clawed finger at Janae. The humans have deceived us all. They have hidden their true nature for 50 years. The Draknari were proud warriors who valued strength above all else. Learning that the species they had dismissed as weak newcomers had once ruled the galaxy was a blow to their pride that they could not accept. We demand an explanation, called out Speaker Zeltai of the Ethereal Collective. The floating crystalline being's voice rang like broken glass. If humans possess such power, why did they not reveal it when they joined the Coalition? What other secrets are they hiding? Janae tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out by dozens of others. The insectoid hive speakers chittered angrily in their complex language. The aquatic depth dwellers released clouds of colored chemicals that indicated extreme distress. Even the usually calm machine beings of the Nexus protocols were flashing warning lights in patterns that hurt to look at. Finally, the ancient voice of Prime Elder Shalun of the Selenari Conclave cut through the noise. The old being's mental projection carried the weight of 3,000 years of wisdom. Silence, she said, and somehow every voice in the chamber stopped. High Counselor O, speak. Tell us what your people have found. Janae took a deep breath. She had practiced this speech during the flight to Coalition Station. But standing before representatives of 47 species who all looked ready to declare war on humanity, made the words stick in her throat. 3 days ago, Captain Dae Ho Kim of the exploration vessel Terra Nova discovered an ancient human ship in the Kepler 442 system. She began. This ship contains the uploaded consciousness of a human military commander from 12,000 years ago. He has revealed information about humanity's past that even we did not know. Lies, snarled Vorthak. No species develops spaceflight and then forgets about it. You have been planning this deception for decades. If I may finish, Jinne said firmly. The consciousness identifies itself as Admiral Taman Park, of something called the Human Imperial Fleet. According to his account, humans once had a vast interstellar empire that ruled much of this galaxy. This empire was destroyed in a war against entities he calls the Dark Ones, beings from outside our reality who consume consciousness itself. The chamber erupted again. Several species began transmitting emergency signals to their homeworlds. The Catharian delegate actually fainted, his blue blood pooling on the chamber floor. The only species that remained calm were the Selenari elders, who watched everything with their ancient, knowing eyes. Commander Hyunwoo Yoon of the Coalition Defense Force stepped forward. He had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy, and the news was not good. Counselors, we have confirmed the energy readings from the Kepler system, he announced. The source is indeed a ship of enormous size, larger than any known vessel. Its power signature suggests technology far beyond anything in our current databases. How convenient, hissed the Vorthak representative. The humans discover evidence of their own ancient empire, just as their ships are being outclassed by Coalition technology. Perhaps they built this ship themselves and are trying to trick us into believing their lies. Dr. Min Ho-song, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, had been studying the data from Admiral Park for the past 12 hours. His analysis painted a picture that made Jinne's stomach turn cold. Counselors, I have examined the biological and technological data provided by this Admiral Park, he said. The information about these Dark Ones is disturbing. If accurate, they represent a threat beyond anything we have encountered. They appear to be extra-dimensional entities that feed on neural energy, on thoughts and consciousness themselves. More human lies. Vorthak roared. They invent a cosmic threat to make us forget their deception. But Prime Elder Shellen raised one ancient hand and her mental voice carried sadness that was felt by every telepathic species in the room. I remember, she said quietly. The Selenari archives speak of the Great Silence, a time 12,000 years ago when entire star systems went dark. When civilizations that had existed for millions of years simply vanished. We thought it was natural disaster. We thought the stars themselves had died. The chamber fell silent. The Selenari were the oldest known species in the galaxy. If their archives supported the human claims, then maybe the impossible was actually true. You're saying humans fought these entities? Asked Representative Kolthara of the Karn clans. The warrior species respected strength, and if humans had battled cosmic horrors for 300 years, that changed how the Karn viewed them. According to the data, yes, Dr. Song replied, but the cost was enormous. The war consumed their entire civilization. The survivors chose to abandon their technology and start over on primitive worlds rather than risk attracting these entities again. Counselor Seo Jin Choi, another human representative, stood up. She had been quiet until now, but Jinne could see the determination in her eyes. Counselors, I understand your shock and anger, she said. We are shocked too. We had no knowledge of this history, but if Admiral Park is correct, then we face a threat that makes our political differences meaningless. These Dark Ones don't care what species we are or what conflicts we have. They will consume us all equally. And how do we know this threat is real? Demanded Speaker Zeltai. How do we know this is not an elaborate human deception? As if summoned by her question, alarms began blaring throughout Coalition Station. Commander Yoon's aide rushed to his side with a datapad, her face pale with terror. Commander, we're receiving reports from observation posts in the Outer Rim, she said. 3 star systems have gone dark in the past 6 hours. Not destroyed, just empty. No energy signatures, no life signs, nothing. The chamber erupted in panic. Representatives began screaming orders to their fleets. Several species announced they were immediately pulling their ships back to defend their home worlds. The careful unity of the Coalition was falling apart in real time. How far are these dark systems from inhabited space? Jinne asked. Approximately 300 light-years from the nearest colony, Yoon replied. But the pattern of disappearance suggests something is moving through that region systematically. Admiral Park's warnings were coming true faster than anyone had expected. The vanguard of the Dark Ones had arrived early. Prime Elder Shalon's mental voice cut through the chaos once more. "The choice before us is simple," she said. "We can spend our time fighting each other over past deceptions, or we can unite against a threat that will destroy us all. The Selenari Conclave chooses unity. We will stand with humanity and any others who are willing to face the dark together." Representative Colthera of the Karn clan stood as well. "The Karn respect warriors, regardless of species. If humans fought these entities for 300 years, then they have proven their courage. We will fight beside them." But Chancellor Vorthak was already transmitting orders to the Draknari fleet. "The Draknari Empire will not be deceived. We will defend ourselves against both these phantom entities and human treachery." As representatives rushed from the chamber to contact their governments, Jinne realized that Admiral Park had been right about one thing. The galaxy was not ready for what was coming. Half the coalition was preparing to fight alongside humanity. The other half was preparing to fight against them. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ancient enemies that had waited 12,000 years for revenge were finally coming home. Commander Yoon approached Jin Ai as the chamber emptied. "High Counselor, what are your orders?" he asked. "Get me a direct communication line to Admiral Park," she replied. "If we're going to survive what's coming, we need to learn everything he knows about fighting these things, and we need to learn it fast." The coalition was splitting apart just when unity was most needed, but there was no time for politics now. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Park's consciousness filled the bridge with information. Holographic displays showed star maps that covered the entire galaxy. Images appeared of human cities that stretched across whole planets. Fleets of ships numbered in the millions moved across the screens like schools of fish in an endless ocean. "This was humanity 12,000 years ago," the Admiral explained. "We were not the newcomers you are today. We were the masters of this galaxy." Captain Deho stared at the images in shock. The humans in these pictures lived in cities that floated in space. They had weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Their ships were so advanced that they could travel between galaxies in days instead of years. "But how is this possible?" Dr. Lee asked. "There are no records of any of this. No ruins, no evidence, nothing. Because we made sure there wouldn't be," Admiral Park said sadly. "When the Dark Ones came, we knew that survival meant hiding. We destroyed our own history to keep them from finding the survivors." The Admiral showed them more images. These were different, darker. They showed things that hurt to look at. Ships that seemed to be made of shadows. Planets that had been drained of all life, leaving behind empty worlds that looked like they had never known the touch of living beings. "The Dark Ones are not like other aliens," Park explained. "They don't come from this universe. They come from the spaces between realities. They feed on consciousness itself. Every thought, every dream, every spark of intelligence, they consume it all." The images showed battles that lasted for decades. Human fleets fought against enemies that could turn matter into energy with a thought. Entire star systems became battlegrounds. Billions of humans died fighting an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. "We held them off for 300 years, Park said, "but the cost was enormous. Every victory required sacrifice. We had to become something we never wanted to be. We had to become destroyers to fight the devourers." Dr. Lee watched as the images showed human commanders making terrible choices. Planets full of people were abandoned to the enemy. Entire fleets threw themselves into hopeless battles to buy time for civilians to escape. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were destroyed by their own people, rather than let them fall to the Dark Ones. "In the end, we won by losing everything," Park continued. "The final battle cost us 90% of our fleet and most of our core worlds. But we managed to push them back into dark space. The survivors had a choice: try to rebuild the Empire and risk the Dark Ones finding us again, or disappear completely." The images showed the Great Exodus. Millions of ships carrying the last humans fled to the outer edges of the galaxy. They found primitive worlds and settled there. They destroyed their advanced technology and started over with simple tools. They chose to become cave dwellers again rather than risk another war. Some went to a small world in a quiet system, Park said. They called it Earth. They decided to forget who they had been and become something new. Something the Dark Ones would never think to look for. Captain Deho felt dizzy. Everything he thought he knew about human history was wrong. Humans weren't the young species that had recently joined galactic civilization. They were the survivors of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. "Why didn't you go with them?" he asked. "Because someone had to watch," Park replied. "The Dark Ones were pushed back, not destroyed. We knew they would return someday, so some of us stayed behind. We uploaded our consciousness into ships like this one and became guardians. We've been sleeping for 12,000 years, waiting and watching for signs of their return." The Admiral's voice became grim. "3 days ago, my deep space sensors detected something. The Dark Ones are coming back. They're still years away, but they're coming. And this time, they're stronger than before." New images appeared on the screens. These showed space that looked wrong somehow. Stars were going dark in patterns that made no sense. Energy readings showed things that shouldn't exist moving through the void between galaxies. "They've spent 12,000 years in dark space, growing stronger," Park said. "The force heading for this galaxy is 100 times larger than what we faced before. And the current galactic civilizations have no idea what's coming." Dr. Lee looked at the readings and felt cold. "What do we do? How do we fight something like this?" "First, I need to wake up my ship completely," Park said. "The Eternal Sentinel has been running on minimum power for thousands of years. Full activation will take time, but once it's done, this ship will be the most powerful vessel in the galaxy." As if responding to his words, the ship began to change. Systems that had been sleeping started to come online. The hum of the engines grew deeper and stronger. Throughout the vast ship, machinery began to wake up after its long sleep. "But one ship won't be enough," Park continued. "We'll need allies. We'll need the entire galactic coalition to understand what they're facing and prepare for war." Captain Daeho thought about the coalition's reaction to this news. Most species already thought humans were dangerous because they were unpredictable. Learning that humans had once ruled the galaxy would cause panic. Some species might decide that humans were as much a threat as these Dark Ones. "Admiral, the coalition isn't going to believe this easily," he said. "They'll want proof. And even if they believe us, they might decide that humans are too dangerous to trust." "I know," Park replied, "but we don't have a choice. The Dark Ones won't just target humans when they arrive. They'll consume every intelligent species they find. If the galaxy doesn't unite against them, everything that thinks and dreams will die." The ship's awakening was sending out energy signals that could be detected across half the galaxy. Every civilization with advanced sensors would know that something big had just activated in the Kepler system. Questions would be asked. Fleets would be sent to investigate. "How long do we have?" Dr. Lee asked. "The Vanguard scouts will arrive in approximately 18 months, Park said. "The main force will be here in 3 to 5 years. That's not much time to prepare an entire galaxy for war." Captain Daeho made a decision. "Dr. Lee, gather everything you can about this ship and what the Admiral has told us. Lieutenant Park, send a priority message to Coalition Command. Tell them we've made a discovery that changes everything." "What should I tell them?" the lieutenant asked. "Tell them that humanity's past has just caught up with its future," Daeho replied. "And tell them that we're all about to learn what it really means to fight for survival." As the Terra Nova prepared to leave the awakening Eternal Sentinel, Admiral Park's voice followed them. "Captain Kim, Dr. Lee, what you've learned today will change the galaxy forever. But remember this. 12,000 years ago, humans stood alone against the dark and won through sacrifice and determination. Today, we don't have to stand alone. Make sure the galaxy understands that when the darkness comes again, we'll face it together or we'll all fall apart." The ancient ship's energy signature was now strong enough to light up sensor screens across 3 star systems. The awakening was complete, and there would be no hiding what had been found. The galaxy was about to learn that its newest members were actually its oldest guardians, and that an ancient enemy was coming home. Captain Daeho Kim stared at the strange signal on his ship's screen. The numbers made no sense. His exploration vessel, the Terra Nova, had been mapping empty space in the Kepler 442 system when the signal appeared. It was old, very old. The frequency pattern belonged to communication systems that died out thousands of years before any known civilization. "Captain, you need to see this," called his communications officer, Lieutenant Sungmin Park. The young man's face was pale as he looked at his readings. "This signal is coming from inside the asteroid belt, but there's nothing supposed to be there." Daeho walked over to the communications station. He had been exploring space for 15 years, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Coalition. In all that time, he had never seen anything like this. The signal was not random noise. It had a pattern, almost like a heartbeat. "How long has it been broadcasting?" Daeho asked. "I don't know, sir. It could be days or it could be centuries," The signal is weak but steady. Deho thought about his orders. The Coalition had sent him to map this system and look for useful minerals. Finding mysterious signals was not part of his mission, but something about this felt important. Very important. Set course for the signal source, he ordered. And wake up Dr. Lee, she's going to want to see this. Dr. Boram Lee was the ship's expert on ancient civilizations. She studied old alien ruins and tried to understand how different species had lived long ago. She was also one of the smartest people Deho had ever met. If anyone could figure out what they were dealing with, it would be her. 2 hours later, the Terra Nova approached the source of the signal. What they found made everyone on the bridge go silent. Floating in the asteroid belt was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a rock. The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times bigger than the largest Coalition warship. Its hull was dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface. "My God," whispered Dr. Lee as she looked at the readings. "Captain, this ship is over 12,000 years old." "That's impossible," said Lieutenant Park. 12,000 years ago, most species were still living in caves. The oldest known civilization is only 8,000 years old. Dr. Lee's hands shook as she studied the symbols on the ship's hull through the telescope. She had spent her whole life studying ancient writings. She knew the symbols of every major civilization that had ever existed. But these symbols were different. These symbols were human. "Captain," she said quietly, "we need to board that ship." Deho looked at her strangely. "Dr. Lee, are you sure? That thing is bigger than a space station. It could be dangerous." "The symbols on the hull are human writing," she said, "but they're in a style that shouldn't exist. If I'm right, this ship is older than recorded human history." The idea seemed crazy. Humans had only been in space for a few hundred years. Before that, they had lived on Earth, slowly developing technology like every other species. The idea that humans had been building giant spaceships 12,000 years ago was impossible, but the evidence was right in front of them. Deho made his decision. "Prepare a boarding party. Dr. Lee, you're with me. Lieutenant Park, you have the bridge." The boarding shuttle flew through space toward the giant ship. As they got closer, they could see that the vessel was even bigger than they had thought. It had multiple levels, weapon platforms, and docking bays that could hold hundreds of smaller ships. It looked like a city that could fly through space. They found an airlock that was big enough for their shuttle. To their surprise, it opened when they approached. The ship's systems were still working after 12,000 years. Inside the ship, emergency lighting cast long shadows down endless corridors. The air was breathable and the gravity felt normal. Everything was built for humans. The right size, the right height, the right proportions. But the technology was far beyond anything humans currently had. "Look at these control panels," said Dr. Lee as they walked through what looked like a command center. "The interfaces are human, but the technology is incredible. These systems are more advanced than anything in the Coalition." They found elevators that moved them through the ship at amazing speed. They saw rooms full of equipment they couldn't understand. They found workshops where incredible machines sat waiting to be used. Everything was preserved perfectly, as if the crew had just stepped out for a moment. Finally, they reached what had to be the main bridge. It was huge, with viewing screens that covered entire walls. In the center was a command chair that looked like it was designed for a human. Behind the chair was a large computer core that hummed with power. "The main computer is still active," said one of the boarding team members. "It's been running this whole time." Dr. Lee approached the computer core carefully. There were symbols on it that she recognized. Ancient human writing that was so old it appeared in no modern records. She touched the interface panel. Suddenly, the bridge came alive. Lights turned on, screens activated, and a voice spoke in clear, perfect human language. Identity confirmed. "Human genetic markers detected. Welcome aboard the Eternal Sentinel. I am Admiral Taemin Park, commanding officer of this vessel. I have been waiting for you." Everyone on the boarding team froze. The voice was human, but it came from the computer. More than that, it sounded like a real person, not an artificial intelligence. "Who are you?" Deho asked carefully. "I am the uploaded consciousness of Admiral Taemin Park of the Human Imperial Fleet. This vessel has been in hibernation mode for 11,743 years, waiting for human contact. You are the first humans to find us since the Great Exodus." Dr. Lee's mind raced. Human Imperial Fleet? Great Exodus? These were terms that appeared in no human history she knew. "Admiral," she said slowly, "what is the Human Imperial Fleet?" There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again, and there was sadness in it. You don't know, do you? You don't remember what we were, what we achieved, what we sacrificed. Another pause. Tell me, what year is it by your calendar? What has become of humanity? Day-Ho answered, telling the Admiral about Earth, about humanity's slow development, about joining the Coalition 50 years ago. As he spoke, he could hear something like grief in the computer's voice. So few, the Admiral whispered. So very few of us left. And you've forgotten everything. The Empire, the fleet, the war. All of it lost. What empire? Dr. Lee asked. What war? The war that cost us everything, Admiral Park replied. The war against the darkness that comes from between the stars. And I'm afraid, my friends, that war is about to begin again.